Dallas, Texas, 1976. When a police officer is murdered, the case to convict a suspect hinges on eyewitnesses and psychiatric testimony. But when a judge gets teary-eyed and the witnesses are motivated by money, can justice be served? Between the population and anarchy stand the police. But who is watching the thin blue line?
Welcome to Movie Friends. My name is Seth.
And I'm Michelle.
Today we're talking about The Thin Blue Line from 1988. Written and directed by Errol Morris. Cinematography by Robert Chappell and Steven Zapsky. Composed by Philip Glass. Edited by Paul Barnes. Featuring interviews with Randall Adams, David Harris, Edith James, Dennis White, and Donald J. Metcalf. Michelle, how are you?
How you doing, Seth? How's your mouth? Last week you had dental work done. This week is a follow-up. How's it going?
Bad. Really, really bad. I can't tell you. I am in pain here. I had my last two wisdom teeth removed this morning. The Novocaine worked on one side.
Mm-hmm.
It did not work on the other side. The dentist did not seem to care. He took out the one that worked first. And so I'm like, okay. And then he went to the other side and I was like, and I had forgotten this, but when I had my other two wisdom teeth taken out, I laughed like the whole time, even though I was just on Novocaine. I wasn't on laughing gas or anything. And so they took my teeth out and I was just laughing. I couldn't stop laughing. I don't know if anyone else has that reaction.
Wow.
No, you don't?
No, I've never had any teeth pulled. So.
Oh, right. That's right. We covered last week your large, perfect teeth.
Yes. But I usually don't laugh at the dentist either.
Okay.
So.
I was just so caught up in what an odd thing this was. And
Yeah,
I had the same last minute reservation that I have when I get a tattoo, like right before they start to do it. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so permanent, right? And I was like, I'm losing two teeth. Like, I'm never going to have these teeth again. They're not replacing them. Like, they're just taking my teeth out. And I've got this guy just jerking my jaw around. And I'm like, he's like shaking my head. And I was like, it was such an odd, what a weird life we live, right? So I laughed.
The way you're describing it and then you laughing like doesn't make sense because it feels like Little Shop of Horrors Steve Martin dentist.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then you're laughing, so.
Yeah. And then he was like, when he finished, he said, I don't know if he was offended that I was laughing, but when he finished, he said, all right, now you can laugh about it.
Oh, and then you probably weren't able to laugh because he ruined it.
Well, at that point, the yanking was done, so I stopped laughing. Anyway.
That was a good 5 minutes on teeth.
Anyway, what's going on with you? Anything crazy like that?
No, nothing crazy like that. It's just super warm. Like I keep saying, my house is super warm. Our basement is in progress. It's about I'm getting closer with the outdoor cats in my life. Yeah.
I look forward to the episode when we record and you're back in your basement.
Me too. That's going to probably happen in October.
Well, it's something to look forward to.
That's right.
Hey, we got an email.
Email.
This is about our episode on The Devil Wears Prada. Remember that one?
Oh, I remember that one.
Mayshell?
Yeah, remember Mayshell? Came and went.
It was fun. The email says, Seth wears nada. This movie surprised me. I agree with Seth. There are certain jobs where you should expect it to not be great. And Nate is a baby and Nate is the villain.
Ooh. Okay.
P.S. I used to be super into fashion. P.S.S. My brother Adam and I wanted to design women's clothing.
Oh.
P.S.S.S. I would have killed to work with Winter. P.S. SSS. My ex-coworkers told me that Anne Hathaway was pretty terrible when she stayed at my old job, and then a bunch of crying emojis. So that's allegedly, of
No.
course. This
Yeah.
is third-hand information we cannot confirm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then P with a bunch of S's. Her song in Les Mis makes me cry every single time.
Yeah, me too.
I love her in Les Mis.
She's great. She's great. Is this from Ben?
This is from Ben.
Thanks, Ben. Did you know that he wanted to design women's clothing with your other brother?
I don't think so.
Oh.
I'm so far removed from any fashion thinking. I guess I never considered that people might design just clothes for women or men.
Yeah. Moving on. Do we have any other emails?
No, that's it. Hey, if you want to send us an email, especially about anything we covered in Mayshell, let us know. moviefriendspodcast@gmail.com. We would love to know.
Hi, this is Dakota, host of Contra Zoom Pod, where we go back and forth about film. I am obsessed with movies. I could talk about them all day, and if you're like me, then you'll love my podcast. Every week we take a new topic, whether it's ranking a director's filmography, covering major film festivals, or getting way into Oscar season. While every week is different, we do have some recurring topics, like our Make Remake series looking at an original film and its remake, or our very popular A History Of program, taking an in-depth look looking at some of the biggest companies involved in film, including Criterion, A24, and Neon. It isn't all super serious topics though, as we always need to play catch up with all the hottest Marvel Cinematic Universe news and general pop culture goings on. There's something for every kind of movie lover, whether you want reviews, interviews, or in-depth conversations. Contra Zoom Pod is found on all podcatcher apps, and visit contrazoompod.com for even more information.
So before we get into the movie and our thoughts and pre-watch thoughts, I just wanted to talk to you about documentaries.
Yeah, that's what's happening this month.
We're here. This is a patron selected month.
Mm-hmm.
This was recommended actually by Ben.
Oh.
Yep, Ben nominated documentaries, and this one won in the vote. If you don't know what we're talking about, patreon.com/moviefriendspodcast, $5 a month. We could be doing your theme right now, but instead of documentaries.
Yeah. I mean, the other choices were pretty wild.
This was a cool round of themes.
Yeah.
But we've never done a documentary on this show before.
No, we've done like a mockumentary, Spinal Tap.
That's right. That's right. So how do you feel about documentaries? Are you into them? Do you watch them? Do you like them?
Yeah, I was thinking a lot about this. I love documentaries, but as I was going through like what I've recently watched, I'm more so into the docu-series.
Okay.
And so I've watched a bunch of those and I look forward to watching those. So like I recently watched The Hollywood Con Queen. I watched Love Stalker Killer, the Ashley Madison doc. I'm in the middle of that. The Curious Case of Natalia Grace. That's a wild one.
None of these.
Anything on Twin Flames, American
Twin
Nightmare. I recently did Quiet on the Set. Did you do that? Quiet on the Set?
No. What's Twin Flames?
Oh, Seth, we can't even get into that.
Well, we can. It's our show. I mean,
you just have to watch. But all that to be said, like usually I'm watching multiple episodes of so a docuseries. So it's been a while since I've just watched one.
Interesting. Okay.
What about you? Are you into documentaries?
Documentaries really affect me. You know,
Oh.
I think it's because like I love movies so much, and so to be like, hey, this is real. This is a movie, but real.
Yeah.
I just think I'm like so susceptible to all of the trappings of, you know, watching a film. And so I feel like every documentary that I watch just changes my life.
Wow.
Yeah. Like when I think about my favorite documentaries, I'm like, oh my God, like I learned about this thing that I'd never thought of before, or something that I had thought of was laid out in such a clear and interesting way that it's just like cemented in my brain that that's the way that the world is. Wow. So yeah, I'm like, I guess I would say like I'm like a documentary sucker. I'm just a sucker for a documentary.
I feel like I am too. I mean, but I don't know if my life has changed, but maybe it's the subject matter that I'm watching. It's
Mm,
usually I'm just like here to watch like a really crazy story or in the true crime space. Like as of recently, like I haven't watched any like animal documentaries or nature docs or travel
yeah.
docs. I mean, documentaries, right, can cover so many subjects. We were talking about that.
Yes,
Like, what are we going to cover in terms of a documentary? There's so
literally.
many
Yeah.
different kinds.
Each month I struggle with, oh my God, what do I pick for this
Right.
theme, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
There's so many different choices. And then this one is like, this isn't even a thing. Like, I feel like animal docs would have been
Right. That's
a
like niching
theme,
down.
or
Sure.
yeah, or true crime, or
Hmm.
musical, or yeah, so like just all documentaries, and
Yeah.
there's this weird thing with movies and documentaries. It feels like they're like twin siblings. I have found sometimes people will be more into movies and then not documentaries, or people will be more into documentaries and not movies.
Which is me. I
Yeah.
much rather watch a documentary than a movie. You're more likely to convince me to watch a documentary versus a movie because I like the real stuff. I like a real
Yeah.
story. Like my favorite type of story to read is usually autobiographical nonfiction.
Yeah, where for me, I will put off. I still haven't watched the Mr. Rogers documentary. I
I
can't
haven't
bring
watched that
myself.
either.
I just know that I'll cry like the entire time. When I
Yeah.
watched the Andre the Giant documentary, which I talked about when we did Princess Bride,
Yep.
I was like, all right, here we go. I'm going to watch it. This is going to be great. And I'm just crying and I'm like
Mm-hmm.
destroyed and devastated. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, I love documentaries, but I have to space them out. I can't do back to back stories.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So you brought up something else that I kind of want to talk about, and I want to be respectful to the people who are here to hear about the Thin Blue Line. And
Mm-hmm.
so I will put in the show notes when we start that. So if you're like, hey, what the heck is going on? Go check those and you can skip ahead to us talking about the movie. But this kind of has to do with the movie. So you and I were talking a little bit the other day about true crime media kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I went on a real journey with true crime stuff. Years back when Serial was out, season 1, I got so hooked into, and that's how I started listening to podcasts, really.
That was pretty much everybody's gateway drug into podcasting.
Mm-hmm. And then when it was over, I was like, well, I need to listen to something else. And so I found different shows, and I was really into S Town.
That was great. I really like that one too.
Yep. And a few other ones. In the Dark season 2, which is the trial of Curtis Flowers. If you haven't
Yes.
listened to that, that is paired with the Thin Blue Line. I think that that's necessary for every American to hear how the criminal justice system works. But the further along with it that I went, it felt like, because it was such a booming genre, that not all of the hosts were as like respectful, I guess I should say.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I got burnt out on it.
I agree. And that's kind of how I still feel now.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'll start listening and I'm like, this is icky. I don't
Yeah.
like the way the hosts are talking about the victim, the victim's family. And there's a line between storytelling and then exaggerating for production.
And that's something that few people have with the Thin Blue Line, is that this is not just a straightforward, here are the facts documentary, but Errol Morris put so much style. He has a lot of thoughts on this movie that don't line up with what a lot of people say about it. For example, he says, I didn't do reenactments. I was listening to him in an interview, and the host said, oh, you were really breaking ground with the reenactments. And he said, I didn't do reenactments. Reenactments tell you what happened. None of what I shot was what happened. I was showing you what didn't happen. Because when we get to the conclusion of what really happened, we never see that version played out. And so he was like, I was showing how all of the stories that they told didn't make any sense.
But you're showing reenactments of the people's story.
Right.
So you
I
are
mean,
in a way. Hey, listen.
hey, if you want to say that to Errol Morris, go for it.
No, I'm good. I'm good.
All right, so now we're getting into it, and I forgot to do a couple of things. So one, before Michelle and I talk about a film, we write down what we think the other one will rate the film at the end of the episode. So let's do that. I don't have a writing utensil.
I have my pen. Let's do it.
I have a pen now too. I feel pretty good about this one. That's Michelle is doing a face that I've never seen before.
Thank goodness. Okay, I'm unsure.
Yeah.
But it's locked in.
Okay. I forgot all about that locked in music. Okay.
I love it so much.
So before Michelle or I watch a film for the first time, we record down our pre-watch thoughts. So let's go to that real quick.
Good morning, movie friends. First time speaking for the day. Not gonna lie, this is the third attempt because I sounded like I had a frog in my throat. Anyway, sitting down to watch The Thin Blue Line. As I said last episode, I have no idea what this is about. Never heard of it. All I can think of is it has something to do with the police. So that being said, I'm not gonna go off on, wild predictions. However, I made myself a cup of coffee, and I would love to know, what is your go-to coffee order? We've talked about this. Seth has given his when he does drink coffee. But do you add sugar? Do you just add milk or cream? Non-dairy milk? Do you steam your milk? Are you an espresso person? Are you a tea person? Decaf? Drink it black? I want to know.
All right, so I was not expecting a coffee order.
Well, you know what? I didn't want to make silly predictions for this. I didn't look
Sure.
anything up. But with the title, I was like, this has to do something with police.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't have to, but that was like
It'd be surprising if it wasn't, right?
Yeah. And so when I told Ant, because Ant never heard of this and he wasn't around to watch it with me, his first thought was like, oh, this must be like pro-police. Is that what you're getting into? And I was like, oh, I'm not sure. I'm not going to look anything up.
Interesting. Okay.
Mm-hmm. But then I was like, well, I am curious, if this is police, there's a stigma, right? Like police drink coffee and eat donuts.
They drink coffee and eat donuts. It's true.
So I was like, everyone, send me your coffee order.
I have discovered that I like oat milk in coffee.
Oh, welcome. Me too.
And I've never had oat milk before.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, my go-to coffee thing, it's always the same. It's a frozen coffee from Dunkin' Donuts, not an iced coffee with coconut. And that's
right. Yep. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And what do you do?
I'm pretty basic. I just like hot coffee, steamed oat milk, or if there's like a fun like macadamia pistachio milk, almond milk, but it's usually just coffee and steamed milk. Or I will do a black half-calf Americano.
Okay. None of this means anything. I'm sorry. I don't know.
That's okay. Maybe our listeners,
but people listening, yes.
I know this has nothing to do with this doc, but I would love to know your coffee order. I'm always curious of like how people take their coffee.
When Michelle says that she would like to know your coffee order, she is telling the truth.
Like,
she will be so
I'm like
tickled.
Genuinely interested in this stuff. Mm-hmm. Like it's the simple stuff that connects us all that I'm really interested in.
Last week, you requested people send us mysterious cats.
Yes.
And they started to, and I had no idea what that was, even though I was very much present for the episode. Uh-huh. I was like, what is this? Yep. Yeah, I thought people were short-circuiting, and then I remembered.
Yeah, I asked for people to just send like mysterious cat emojis, no context. But what I found funny is most of them were sent tagging you.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't tagged. And I was like, that's even funnier because now we're getting Seth. And Seth is so confused. Like Seth was texting me and being like, what is happening? Did you ask for cats? And I was like, yeah, well, always.
So now next week, people will be sending me their coffee orders. I'll be like, okay, yeah, great.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
Just send Seth like the coffee cup emoji if you don't want to send your actual order. That's funny. Anyway.
So I don't want to ask you, the big general question of how you felt about this.
Yeah.
But this was a first time watch for you. You had never seen it before. You never heard of it. I'm assuming this is the first Errol Morris doc that you've seen.
Sure is. Sure is.
So can you kind of give me perhaps an insight into your journey with this?
Sure. Last week, when you gave me the title, I was like, well, what does that mean? Can you give me anything? And so you give me this synopsis that's like the Carol Burnett show, a chocolate shake.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, that gives me nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'm going into like, okay, this is a documentary, something about the police is what I've come up with. I tried to watch it and I was like, nope, can't do this right now. I don't know. Maybe I'm not in the right mindset. I don't want this to ruin it for me. So I turned on the Ashley Madison docuseries. And I was like, much better. You asked for the journey, so I'm telling you the journey.
Oh, no. Yeah, I know.
So then I tried again the next day, which was Monday morning. And I sat down knowing that this was a documentary, but I wasn't prepared to watch a film.
Got it.
And so I really had a hard time following.
Mm-hmm.
I was really struggling because this is something you really need to pay attention to. And I think maybe it would be helpful if I were to tell someone about this, or you could have told me like, hey, listen, this is a documentary, but treat it like you're watching a film.
Got it.
And like, I just had a hard time processing. And I don't know if this is like the way I process information, but the lack of the lower third, the lack of title cards, the lack of placement of time, place, names, dates I had just such a hard time following. And then we have these, stylized scenes of like a stopwatch for the hypnotism and the milkshake falling 5 million times. I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. So that's where I was at with that.
Interesting.
I sat down to watch a documentary. I wasn't prepared to watch a film.
Interesting. Okay. All right. I should say also quickly.
Yeah.
We're not going to go through all of the details of the case. One, that would be really boring. Two, we're also not going to do that because we'll definitely forget some details. So,
yeah.
I think that's really interesting that you said you were prepared for a documentary, not for a film.
Yeah.
Because this is a unique experience, maybe not nowadays, but at the time when this came out, Errol is very, look, I'm so comfortable with him. I call him by his first name, very quick to point out he's not the first person to use reenactments in a documentary. He doesn't even consider them reenactments. And I didn't even know what lower thirds were. Like you had texted me about lower thirds and I called them bottom thirds.
Okay, well, you're in the general same idea. But
I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah, and it came to me midway, and I was like, where's the lower thirds? Mm-hmm. This is what I need. I need to keep being reminded who's who. Mm-hmm. What's your role in this story? We get none of that, and that's why it feels like a film, which this is a film. Spoiler alert, this is a film.
Yes. When I watched this for the first time, I had trouble keeping the names straight between the two guys.
Yeah.
Between Randall and David, because the story of what happened is like intertwined and we're getting all these different versions of it. And I was like, wait, so who is who? Obviously, when you're looking at them, you can tell the difference between the two of them and their demeanor and their version of things. But I just didn't think like, oh, like where are their names? And I'm curious how the film sits with people. Like, I think that when a documentary is like telling you who people are and there's a narration, maybe it's a little easier to like not pay as close attention.
Yeah.
Where in this one, the conversations lead you into the next person who's going to be talking.
Yeah, but it's hard to follow. Like,
Yeah.
and that was the thing is like I knew I wanted to know this story. Like as soon as
Mhm.
they started talking, as soon as we open with Randall and he's talking about how he ended up picking up David, right? I was like, okay. And as it went on, and I'm like, I'm just really having a hard time following here. And like when you go
Mhm.
into a documentary, like you said at the beginning of the show, you're here to learn something.
Mhm.
And I'm like, I want to learn this. The way you're presenting it to me is really difficult. And so afterwards, I read about the case. I listened to a couple of shows recapping the case, and I was like, oh, okay. And it made me appreciate this artistic form that we did here.
Mhm.
And so, like, I don't want to insult this because I think this is a piece of art, as
Yeah.
all
Mhm.
movies and stories are, right?
Yeah.
As far as like a documentary, this was like really, it was for me hard to follow. And I don't want to keep interrupting you, Seth, but I couldn't remember like the earliest documentary I've watched.
Mm.
You know, nowadays, like I watch so many and I'm like given the information. It's very easy to follow. Yes, some of the things are stylized, but like I said, just to go back, like I'm given dates, I'm given title cards, I'm given names like repeatedly.
Right,
And so
right,
I'm
right.
like, I can follow this very easily of who's who.
So I think all of that, I don't want to say it's like super intentional. Like I don't think that Errol Morris was like, I'm going to lose people. But the best thing that I did in researching this was just listen to different interviews with him and how he lays things out, like even on his own website. And one of the things that really struck me was he says his work is not cinema verite. It's not the cinema of real life, right? Cinema verite was a movement of film with realistic people, realistic dialogue, slice of life stuff. He says his stuff is it's not supposed to be real. It's anti-verite, he says. And when someone asked him like what got you into documentaries, he was like, I don't like documentaries. And he listed a Buñuel film, Land Without Bread, as like an inspiration for him. And Buñuel is a real weird filmmaker. Errol Morris actually said like his biggest inspiration for making movies was what he called whack out movies. Weird, surreal, experimental stuff. Like that was interesting to him. And his stuff, it's great. It's interesting. It tells a story that kind of pulls you in, but it's definitely different from just like informational documentaries. So I don't think that you're wrong, I guess I should say. And
I know
like
I'm not wrong with my
noticing.
opinion, Seth,
Yeah.
but thank you for telling me.
No, but like for noticing all of those like stark differences
Yeah.
between this and other documentaries. Because like I said, when I watched it, I just I wasn't paying attention to all that. Like I said, I had trouble following
Yeah.
names and
Yeah.
all of that too. But it was more just like the experience of it. And so I definitely didn't intend on like pulling the rug from underneath of you on our first, outing into documentaries, but I definitely did. And this is definitely different, but it's intentional.
You know what this felt like?
Mhm.
This felt like Tampopo. Not not in how I felt about that,
Right, right.
but the way you pitched it to me versus going into it.
Right.
Because since then you've been like really good about
Hmm.
like, and I understand why you sold it the way you did. And it's fine because I've come around and it's good. I did my own reading and
Yeah.
now I appreciate it. But I will pitch it differently to my friends
Yes.
when I talk about this.
He also talks a lot about how it's not all just weird nonsense that doesn't make sense. I pulled this quote that I really loved. He says, I am no postmodernist. I live in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And one of the nice things about Cambridge, Massachusetts is that Baudrillard isn't in the phone book. To me, there's a physical world out there, pure and simple. There's a world where things actually happen. In The Thin Blue Line, it was of all consuming importance to figure out who was driving that car, who pulled the gun out from underneath the seat, and who shot the cop. Questions like these are not up for grabs. So even though he's really experimenting with the form and does not seem to care about how other people make documentaries and like
Yeah.
the quote unquote rules, he is still trying to arrive at a concrete answer. And if you go to his website on the section for the thin blue line, it says, I have often heard people say that the thin blue line got an innocent man out of prison. Yes and no. The movie brought the case to national attention, but it was my investigation part, of which was done with a movie camera, that got Randall Adams out of prison. And so he goes on to say, like, it was the recordings that proved that all of the eyewitness testimonies committed perjury. That's what got him out of prison. It wasn't like, oh, the movie came out and now everyone has changed their mind. It was like the hard evidence that he was able to provide. And so I think to him, the movie can be still experimental and interesting because it's not necessarily laying out the case. That's what the hard evidence is doing.
Right. But yes, I mean, I understand what he's saying, but also I very much just feel like what he's saying is what is actually being shown and he's trying to negate it, but it's actually that this is what it is. Let's go to the facts here. The facts are
He's
being
an
shown. So I
yeah.
listened. Did you listen to his interview on Criminal with Phoebe Judge?
I did not.
He's an interesting dude.
He's a very interesting guy. He's the type of guy where I'm like, I don't know if I like this person or
Right.
not.
Right.
And not to say that he's unlikable. It just seems like he has a very, very distinct way of thinking that is very much him. Errol Morris, to me, seems like the least Hollywood type
Yeah.
person, who's making films. And that's great. It should be, you know what I mean? Like there should be people who have talent and have been successful and don't have to do interviews the way that everyone else does and make films the way that everyone else does. So in that regard, I like him because I'm like, yeah, Errol Morris seems like a punk dude who
Right.
doesn't care.
Are all of his movies like this? Have you seen of his other stuff?
Yeah. After I watched this, I was like, I
need
need to watch
more.
everything that this guy has done. He has a fantastic documentary called Gates of Heaven, which is about 2 pet cemeteries and the people who run it. And I thought about doing that, but I was like, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's a little too soon,
Michelle is
in my
in that.
personal life.
Right.
Yeah.
So he had originally started this not looking into the case of Randall, but he wanted to do a story on this Dr. Death guy. In case you don't remember, a psychiatrist was brought in to test Randall Adams to determine if he would be a threat later in life. Because in Texas at the time, in order to get the death penalty, you didn't just have to prove that they committed the crime. You had to prove that they would commit the crime again if they were not killed. So it's like, we must kill this person because they will kill again, and the killing of them will prevent further killing. This doctor would come in and interview people, and then he would testify in court that with 100% certainty, he knew that they would commit a violent crime, violent murder again. Not only that, but this prosecutor had a 100% conviction rate.
Yep.
You have 2 men who, a quote is said in the film, which is, a good lawyer can convict a guilty man, but a great lawyer can convict an innocent man.
Mm-hmm.
And so Errol Morris starts down this path of working on a story about this Dr. Death. And the doctor says to him, interview the people that I've put away and you'll see for yourself that they're violent criminals. And so that's how he gets hooked up with Randall Adams. And in hearing his story, he's like, oh, actually, this is the story that I want to do.
Yeah, pretty wild.
It's horrible. Like, I don't know.
The wild thing to me was just like, you have David Harris, who clearly is guilty. It's very clear that he is guilty.
Mm-hmm.
But because He was 16.
Mhm.
Texas was like, well, he's too young. We can't have him, one, we can't have him guilty, and two, we can't have him get the death penalty. So they're like, well, Randall, the guy he's with, even though there was multiple times when David Harris was like, yeah, I did do it.
Yes.
My
Yeah.
friends, his buddies who were like, he bragged about doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was like, well, actually, no. And they're like, oh, okay, we'll go on that. Randall must be guilty.
Right. It's crazy because he has the gun. He
Yep.
hid the gun.
Yep.
Filled it with oil in a bag and buried it in a river. So, I mean,
he brings the cops like, oh, I know where it is. I know where it's. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He stole the car. Like everything, right, is pointing to this guy. And the only thing pointing to Randall is David.
Yeah.
David says, oh, well, it was him.
Yeah.
And so that's crazy. It's crazy to like turn your whole investigation based on your main suspect and the person that all of the physical evidence is pointing towards. You turn it to the other person because they say so.
Right. And then you have these eyewitnesses coming up.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like no way they could actually remember what they think they're remembering.
Mm-hmm.
It was at night. It was dark. There's no way you could even like see through a car, right? Because this is about a police officer who was shot.
Right.
At like a checkpoint.
Yeah, the car was being driven with no headlights. And so they're like, hey, you gotta...
And they stopped him. Right.
Right. But it's a stolen car.
But the eyewitnesses were so ridiculous. You're almost like, this cannot be real. Because you have the one of the guys, Michael, he was like, wait, I think it was this. He kept saying, I think. No, it definitely, no, I think.
Yeah.
And where...
Was it blue?
Was it blue? I think it was blue.
This is a blue Ford. Was it Ford? Well, it was a blue something.
It was a blue something.
Yep.
And we're going to go on that. We're just going to believe, yes, he's credible. He's credible. Let's use him.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me think of Serial. Remember, like, having Sarah Koenig, it like, Serial opens up with asking, like, where were you on, the date of, do you remember what you were doing in high school? And it's like, sometimes I think of that often. And I'm like, if someone were to come to me and be like, where were you on like December 3rd, 2003 at 2 p.m.? I'd be like, I have no idea.
Not only that, but some of the eyewitnesses are identifying him incorrectly. Yes. And they're not allowed to introduce that to the jury, right?
Yep.
On the appeal. The one guy who identified him after his picture had been publicized in the newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, when Morris lays it out the way that he does, you're just like, oh, this can't be real. Like, this can't be the whole case for the prosecution. And it is.
Right.
And, when we get to the end, the confession, and he says, like, well, if he had let me stay with him, maybe none of this would have happened. And I don't think that he's just saying, like, oh, I was trying to get back at him. Because,
no,
he killed that cop and drove away and didn't think about it, beyond telling his friends about it. And he said, after I testified, I never knew what happened to Randall. They let me go because I gave them information because he had all these other charges,
right?
Down in Veeder, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And for cooperation, they let him go. So I think that he's saying more like, I wouldn't have been out on the road if I was staying, in the motel with them that night. Yeah, for me, it's just such a scary story because you want to think that this could never happen to you. And you want to believe that, well, I would never commit this crime and I would never do this and do that. But if someone else sets you up and they need somebody and you have these strangers who don't know you, now they're swearing up and down that, oh no, I saw this person. And the lawyer for Randall, Edith James.
Love her so much.
Oh God, Edith James is
we need
incredible.
More. I need more of her.
Yeah. She says, she's like, it's the last day of the trial. And we're like, yeah, they're not going to convict him. And then this witness comes in and she's pointing at him and screaming and saying, that's him. I know that's him. And she says flat out, it's that testimony that got him convicted. And so like for you, what was your crime? Hanging out with a person for the day?
Right.
and going to bed.
Which, like, not to dwell on that so much,
Mm-hmm.
but I
Oh,
do find
dwell.
that, yeah, no, I do find it interesting that Randall, him and his brother were on the road.
No, so that's a little. So I had to piece together some of this stuff.
Weren't him and his brother like on moving to Denver or coming from Denver?
They were pretty much living there. They had jobs there. They were planning on moving out, I believe, to California.
Okay.
And the reason was because Randall had developed bad arthritis and like he couldn't do cold winters. So they're like, let's move out to where it's warm, basically. I can't quite remember how, but he ended up getting a construction job in that town.
Yes, that's right.
And then so they were kind of just staying there. And, you know, he was described as like basically like a tramp, you know, like a vagrant or a person moving around. That wasn't quite the case.
No. But to go back to like just human connection and interaction, Randall, and please let me know if I'm retelling this wrong. Randall's car runs out of gas. And so David Harris in the stolen car sees him and decides to help him.
Yep.
And from there, they spend the day together.
Yep. Because David had stuff that he was trying to pawn.
Right.
And so the two of them kind of went around town like, hey, you know, I'll show you places to pawn. I don't know. But I kind of get it as a person who, you know, I think I told a story on the show. I picked up 2 hitchhikers.
Yes. So this is what
And
I'm
I ended
getting
up
at. This
spending
is,
like
yes.
3 hours with them.
Right. This is why I brought this up, because you're the type of person that this would happen to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like
Without a
you would
doubt.
end up doing random things with a stranger.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'd be like at night, you'd be like, hey, sorry, you can't actually come back and sleep at my house. Although you probably would be like, yeah, sure.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Right. Right.
It's different with kids. If it was just me, I'd be like, move in. This will be great. But yeah.
Yeah. And so that was interesting to me. Just like I was like caught off guard by that. But then I was like, wait a minute, Seth would do this.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think everybody would. Also, it's maybe a different time. This is like the late 70s.
Yeah, and they were, you know, drinking and smoking.
They go to a
and hanging out,
drive-in.
and they go to a drive-in, get something to eat, whatever, you know.
You're bored? You just need someone to talk to, hang out with?
Bored, day off. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, and he had helped him out, you know. Like it wasn't like they just saw each other on the street and like, let's hang out all day. He had helped
No, I
him with the
know.
gas. And
I know.
so I think there's like a little bit of a basis for like
Yeah.
trusting each other or
But to
palling
spend like
around.
the whole day together, it's so strange.
Yeah.
Not for you.
Not for me. I can
Not for you.
totally see this happening. I see people all the time and I'm like, I wonder if they need a ride or like.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's very kind of you.
And what's really messed up is at the end, Randall says to David, he's like, hey, you know, you can't stay here, but if you come back on Monday, I can probably get you a job.
Yeah.
You know, because he's selling his stuff. He's young, you know, he's like on the run or whatever. So he's still like trying to help him out and be nice.
For David, right? Who's I get he's trying to pawn off the stuff, right? But like what made him stop? Did he stop because he wanted to be a good citizen, help someone? Just like in your first reaction as a human is like, "Oh, let me see if I can help."
Yeah. Maybe
Yeah.
David wasn't all bad, you know?
Well, 16 and not thinking, which he does say a couple of times in his own words, like,
Yeah.
I was young. I wasn't really thinking about it.
It's interesting how Morris has all of these little side stories in a lot of the interviews. He talked about interviewing bad people, and he said interviewing is listening, and you need to like listen to what they're saying. In this movie, where he is lining out for us how David Harris, because he wanted to get away, sent an innocent man to jail, right? We also get this story about him and his brother who died when he was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
How did you feel about that?
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. It's like we're just kind of layering to understand David a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
of maybe why he is the way he is, also showing maybe this is why he did and committed what he did, because he's in pain.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I mean, I think it's a great choice to
Mm-hmm.
do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that he's trying to necessarily get us to sympathize with him, but maybe just understand
Right.
a
Yeah.
little bit more than just, hey, this is the bad guy.
Right.
It's like,
Yeah.
hey, this is the bad guy, and here's some information about the bad guy.
And we're all human.
I loved the one side story about John Dillinger and how his dad was one of the FBI agents when John Dillinger was killed. And he's like, oh, and hey, by the way, everyone always thought that it was a woman in a red dress, right? But it was actually orange and it was the lights. And it's like, they're so excited to share with you about how facts from a case can be completely different from
Mm-hmm.
what we think they are.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh my, like, do you hear yourself?
Yeah. Yeah. This might be a weird question,
Sure.
but if we're looking at this as a film, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who was your favorite, or who'd you get a kick out of the most in terms of the eyewitnesses as a side character?
Well, I mean, I think
It's Emily Miller, right?
she is at parts the most evil person in this movie. And like you said, like you kind of get a kick out of her. I kind of like feel a little bit for her, but then learning that she was also testifying under cooperation to help get her daughter off of charges and possibly herself off of charges. And then you also throw the money that was up for reward. And I felt less for her after that, because when you first meet her, she's talking about how, oh, you know, I grew up watching noir films and I wanted to be that. And I always wanted to be a detective. And so you're like, okay, all right, you know, person, you know, in the neighborhood who's real nosy. I can kind of see why you're, but then I stopped and I was like, I don't know that I believe any of that, actually. She might just be lying.
Oh, yeah.
Because if she doesn't back up what she said, then she would be admitting to perjury.
And just like her husband, too. The two of them is so interesting to watch these two. And separately, interviewed separately.
Yeah. When he's talking about, oh, she tried to tell on me. She tried to say I was running drugs. I was like, why would you be married to that
Like,
person?
I need like a side story. I need an episode on them.
When she was like, oh, I'm always looking around. And there's crimes and murders, even around my own house. And I'm like, what are you talking about? What does that even mean? Yeah. But I think that's when you kind of realize like something isn't sitting right with this person.
Right.
What about you? Was it her for you too?
It was her. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then Dennis, Harris's friend, they cut to him a couple of times about, he's like, he came back and bragged.
Right. You're there in court that day. It's not laid out the way that it is in this film. But when you see it all laid out like this, and you hear the detectives talking about the case, and you hear the judge talking about the case, it just makes me feel, like I said, that this could happen to anybody.
Oh, yeah. No, you're scared. Like, I trust no one. You can't trust anyone. Yeah. That's how it makes you feel.
And you know, you could say like, oh no, if you just stay away from certain people and you do the right thing, and
no,
it's like, I don't think so. You know, when a case can be built on this flimsy of evidence, which this film did put a lot of the practices that were proven to be absolutely stupid. It did put them under like a closer microscope and helped change some things. I think nowadays it's more common for people like you and me, just normal people who are not part of law enforcement or the judicial system, to know how eyewitness testimony is not like the end all be all. Because, you know, for years it was like, well, we have an eyewitness. We have this person who says, yes, Michelle was there wearing a red dress. And so that's all there is to it. And now we know that, you know, memory fills in a lot of gaps. I've heard it said that when you're remembering something you're only remembering the last time that you remembered it and not the actual initial memory.
Wow. We got to sit on that for a minute.
And so, like, when you remember it and you put in certain things, it's hard for you to shake those and have, a clear memory of what actually happened.
Well, I'm thinking about my life totally different now. Can't even trust myself.
And that is why these things are quite difficult,
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like the further we go, there's all of these methods that come out and we're like, oh yeah, DNA evidence. And now we're looking at DNA evidence very differently. And we're like, oh, maybe it's not the end all be all.
Right. The one thing that I questioned is Officer Woods was shot and he was on duty that night with his partner, Teresa
Yes.
Turco, but we
Yes.
never hear from her.
Yes.
We see the retelling of the reenactment, as Errol says, we're not doing that, but we are.
Mm-hmm.
So we see her, but someone posing as her and what was going on and her having the chocolate milkshake, but we never hear from her.
Yes. So on his website, he goes through all the different claims that he uncovered. So for Teresa Turco, he says, Teresa Turco claimed that she was out of the patrol car and at the back window of the Comet when her partner was shot and killed. I discovered an internal affairs memo never revealed to the defense that discredits her trial testimony. I also interviewed an internal affairs investigator who revealed that Turco had been hypnotized, leaving open the possibility of post-hypnotic suggestion. He also believes that she had never left the police car until after the shooting. Also, her comments at the crime scene never indicated that there was more than one person in the car. And so a very big reason why she maybe was not in this movie is because I don't want to say that she lied, but because, everything that I just read, it was not accurate.
But don't you think that could have been shown since the eyewitnesses were not accurate?
Yeah. And I can't speak for why he didn't. Maybe he had compassion on her because she saw her partner murdered and didn't handle it correctly.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Maybe it just didn't work in the flow of the movie.
So the end, which is like the best part, in my opinion, the cassette tape, just like this, the image of this cassette rolling and David telling what happened, the confession, right? And so Errol has this information, but then doesn't release it right away. This doesn't become public knowledge until the movie's put out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that part I'm not entirely clear on. I don't know when that information was handed over.
On Errol's part?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I cannot answer that. If
I
you're
was
listening
so,
and
yeah,
please let us know.
I was so captivated by that part. I was like, this is so this right here. This is all I need. This is great.
And they had the interview and his camera broke down.
Thank
so
goodness, because this is great. I love this. But then I was like, well, wait a minute. When I read about it and this helped Randall get off, or it helped with his case. And I was like, well, how long did he have this information until it was shared?
Right.
Did he have to finish his piece of art first?
And that's part of where I started to feel a little icky with some true crime stuff was what is the concern of the person making it? And I'm not going to put that on Morris because, like I said, I don't really know.
Right.
For all I know, he made a copy and sent it, to the Supreme Court of Texas that day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As someone who's invested in the story and you're pursuing the truth, when does the well-being of the subject interfere with I need to finish my film, or my art, or my podcast, or my whatever?
Right. It's interesting.
So I want to ask you about the score. Did you like it? Did it make an impression on you?
I'm going to be honest with you. I know it should have. I'm not going to lie to you. Philip Glass, right? Yeah. I know I should be coming at you and being like, wow. And no offense, I'm sure I can't. It did nothing for me because I was
Okay.
struggling so much of trying to
Sure,
follow
sure,
this
sure.
story. So I think if
Right,
I
right,
were
right.
to watch this again, I would pay more attention to that part.
Well, you know what's really interesting,
Mm.
and
Mm.
I'm not necessarily suggesting that you do this,
Mm-hmm.
but now that you have like a firm grasp on the story,
Yes.
if you go to Spotify and you listen to the soundtrack, it's not just the music, it's all of the interviews that the music plays with.
Oh.
And so it's like a mini audio version of the movie. It's really cool. It's really, really cool. I listened to it earlier today and I was like, oh,
I like
very
that.
cool.
I
Yeah.
like that. Okay. All right. I'm into
So
that.
you can skip around, go to the parts with Edith James.
Yeah.
As he's making the film, he had made a little soundtrack made up of Philip Glass music that he was like cutting to. And he was like, oh, this is so great. And he says, I had the good fortune of actually convincing him to write the soundtrack himself. Someone asked me why Philip Glass, and I said, because he does existential dread better than anybody. He's the master of existential dread.
Wow.
I heard him comment on, he said, for years people will say, why is this movie so dark? Why is it so dark? And he's like, you wouldn't say that about a noir film, a crime story. He's like, it's dark because it's about a police officer being murdered on a dark highway at midnight in cold blood. He's like, it's a dark story.
Yeah.
I agree. Like, I know this score didn't make an impact on you, but it's scary. And it's not just like a passive score. Like, I feel like it's very aggressive. Philip Glass's music is, it purveys a good amount of dread, except for in the end sequence of The Truman Show, which Michelle will remember. I went on for like 20 minutes when we covered The Truman Show and how that's like the most perfect scene ever.
Yeah. Except I wanted to change it.
Yeah. The investigation gets Adams out of prison, and he ended up in a legal battle with Morris because of the rights to his story. And so I don't know, he maybe just wasn't planning on ever getting out of prison. His sentence was commuted from the death penalty to life in prison. And, he signs over a release for the rights to his life rights. And then when he gets out of prison, I guess he wanted to do something different with them. Well, here's a quote from Adams. Adams himself said of the matter, Mr. Morris felt he had the exclusive rights to my life story. I did not sue Errol Morris for any money or any percentages of the Thin Blue Line, though the media portrayed it that way.
Oh.
And then Morris says, when Adams got out, he became very angry at the fact that he had signed a release giving me rights to his life story, and he felt as though I had stolen something from him. Maybe I had. Maybe I just don't understand what it's like to be in prison for that long for a crime you hadn't committed. In a certain sense, the whole crazy deal with the release was fueled by my relationship with his attorney, and it's a long, complicated story, but I guess when people are involved, there's always a mess somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to ask you about the hypnotism thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Remember when you tried to do that to me on this show?
Yeah, it didn't work both times.
Mm-hmm.
But like they say in the doc, they're like, so we tried something and it was really expensive. How is that really expensive?
I don't know. I guess hiring someone and
hiring a hypnotist? You can hire a hypnotist for your 5-year-old's birthday party. Like, what are you talking? Like, oh no, I'm serious.
Oh
like,
yeah, I
what
mean,
are they
I guess like
talking about?
a credible one that
Who is a credible hypnotist?
I mean, I don't know.
It's a magician.
No, I mean, Seth, there are professional hypnotists.
Hypnotists?
Yes. One
No.
got John Mulaney to stop smoking.
No, a magician can do that.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Again, I think this is out of your scope. I don't think we should judge. I don't think we should judge if someone was a hit. If someone's
I'm
a
not
hypnotist.
judging. No,
Are you? Because you're saying they're just a magician.
no, you're saying they're just a magician. You don't
Don't-
understand how
don't
highly
Twist
in
my
regard I
words.
hold magician.
Oh, please, Sethels. Do not.
No, I think magicians are great. I'm just saying, how is it so? Like for them, they're telling this story, but then to note the cost, that's what I'm getting at. It's like,
Yeah.
are there world-class hypnotists who are charging incredible amounts of money out there?
This is the late 70s, so maybe. I don't know how much
That's
does
true.
it
In the
cost.
70s, yeah, there was
76, right?
a lot of cult stuff out there.
There you go. This was the scene with just like a pocket watch on a black screen,
Mm-hmm.
slow-mo. Yeah. I want you to imagine my face during this. I just want you to picture me by myself watching and be like, what am I watching right now? It's so clear in my mind. I haven't been thinking about that often.
The part of this that infuriates me, maybe the most. Well, two lines. One is the whole, a good prosecutor can convict a guilty man, a great prosecutor can convict an innocent man. But when the judge tells the story about how the prosecution in their closing statements talked about the thin blue line, and the thin blue line is that which stands between society, civilized people, and anarchy. And he talks about tearing up on the bench.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think?
I don't even know. I don't. I have nothing good to tell you, Seth.
I
don't.
Even if that's true, how are you as a judge admitting that on camera?
Right. Well, this just goes.
It's crazy.
And so, like, what Morris said is he's just presenting the facts here. He's just like showing a story.
He's not making all
this
of
up.
these people just hang themselves, basically.
Well, yeah. These are people's truths, right? So he's not telling them to say this. No one's like egging them on to say this. It's crazy.
I want to be clear. Like, what happened to Officer Woods is horrible.
Yeah.
Like, it's tragic.
Yeah.
He was a young dude. His wife was going to give him a bulletproof vest for Christmas, which this is, I think, about a month before Christmas.
Yeah.
I think it was like Thanksgiving weekend.
Yep.
It's horrible and it's tragic. And I understand the fervor with which they are attempting to bring justice for this police officer. You know, he's someone on their team, right?
Mm-hmm.
They mention how they had cop killings before and they always buttoned it up real quick, which just the way that they do this, you know, when they're questioning Randall and they put a gun on the table and they say, grab that.
Yeah.
So are they trying to get his fingerprints on a gun?
Right. They just want this to end. The holidays are coming. Also, David Harris is 16. No go.
Right.
Even if he did it, he's too young, so we can't use him. You'll do. It's like you'll do.
Right. People won't be satisfied unless we get the death penalty.
Right.
And we've got this prosecutor who he's got a 100% track record. We have this psychiatrist who he always says that the person will commit the crime again. And so it's like, we can do this quickly. We'll get him shut up and then the case will be closed.
Yeah. Wrap it up. So
the Academy Awards would not include this in Best Documentary because of the reenactments, which I think is pretty interesting and a good indication of how, you know, we might watch this in 2024 and be like, you know, okay, yeah, it's a little different from documentaries, but how weird this was when it came out.
Yeah, I think you have to I had to keep reminding myself that because reenactment, everybody does reenactments.
Yeah. So Harvey Weinstein tried to market this movie as more of a thriller. Errol Morris got a note after he did an interview that he was too boring and that he had to like try to sell. They wanted to sell this as like a whodunit. You have to see this. It's action packed. It's not just a boring documentary. So when this came out, yeah, it was a different kind of movie.
Yeah.
The film critic Destin Thompson gave the film a perfect score He said the film was more like a waking nightmare than a docudrama. A true story of murder and justice evidently miscarried, wrapped in the fictional haze of a surrealistic whodunit. It will leave you in a trance for days. And in 2014, the Sight and Sound poll, film critics voted The Thin Blue Line the 5th best documentary film of all time.
What's number one?
I don't know.
Oh,
Michelle's like, we should have watched that one.
well, what are they talking about, you know?
So this movie employs, kind of like with the reenactments, it employs like a Rashomon type story where each time we hear the version of events, we're shown it in like a different way.
Yeah.
And then the last thing that I just kind of want to note before getting into the facts is the other lawyer, Dennis White, literally quit after this case.
Because he was like, I can't deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was like, if something this bad can happen, I want to do something else. Like he didn't want to have anything. Can you imagine that? Like, can you imagine recording an episode of a podcast so bad that you had to quit doing it altogether? And I know that's a very silly comparison, but like,
you know what? I can imagine that. Now that you put it like that.
Are you feeling that right now?
No. If I haven't left, this would make me leave. No. But I can't, like, in all seriousness, like, yeah, you get, things can heavily affect the mind. So
yeah,
I can believe that.
But you would think like, okay, you know, a doctor has a bad day, you lose a patient. A lawyer, you have a bad case, or you see justice go the wrong way. But this dude, like, yeah, crazy.
This could have been the
Absolutely
catalyst
crazy.
too of like, I'm done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was. It's
Yeah.
horrible. Absolutely horrible. So I couldn't find a budget for this. Morris said that he did end up losing money on this movie. The movie made $1.2 million at the box office. This movie currently has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes critic score, 90% audience score.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
4.1 on Letterboxd, 79 on Metacritic. There is a Criterion release of this. This was included in the National Film Registry in the year 2001, and Roger Ebert gave this 3.5 stars. So if we put all of those things together, this might be like the most highest rated and revered film that we've done on this show.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
Yes.
So now we'll go to a segment of the show where we talk about what we would cut, what we would edit, and what we would keep. It's called What the Keck. All right. So do you want me to go first? You want to go first?
I can go first.
Okay, go for it.
Okay. So I'm going to cut the second time the milkshake falls. I'm good. Like we had like a little bit, we lingered too much on it, and it might have, I definitely know it fell once, but we know it definitely fell twice.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it fell a third time.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah.
Cutting one of those. I am editing in, like if this was my perfect vision, I am putting in Teresa. I want to see something of her in there.
Yeah.
And I am keeping all of Emily Miller.
Wow. Okay. All right. So I'm going to cut nothing. I'm going to edit down some of the reenactment stuff just because I feel like I would rather watch the people's faces just telling the story than go back to that as often as we do. And then I am keeping everything from Edith James.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Like you said earlier, give me more. Give me more.
Yeah. I want her and Emily, all of it.
So we asked some friends on Twitter what they thought, and maybe not surprisingly, but we didn't get as big of a response for The Thin Blue Line as we did for The Devil Wears Prada.
Michelle versus Seth. So perfect comparison here.
So Sean at Tyler_Burnham says, The Thin Blue Line made me do a complete 180 on my views. The movie was literally life-changing for me. I encourage everyone to watch Errol Morris's movies. I believe they will get you to think in surprising new ways.
Sean Shank, send an email. That's all.
Yeah, go let us know what was the 180.
It's such like a strong statement, and I need to know more.
But hey, I agree. Like I said, when I watch a documentary, My life has changed. Maybe I should watch a documentary about like exercising.
Yeah.
I'll be like, wow, that's how you do it. KMS78 at KMSTX78 says, my favorite doc of all time, one of my 10 favorite films of all time, and my favorite film of 1988, with sincere apologies to Running on Empty and Die Hard. And then they linked to their 5-star review on Letterboxd saying, my thoughts on this truly groundbreaking masterpiece.
Wow. Favorite film of 1988.
I was born in 1988.
Mazel.
Do you know your Life movie?
My life movie?
Yeah, it's the movie that was number 1 at the box office the weekend that you were born. You got to figure it out.
Okay.
It's easy to find out, but
you just like Google it, right?
Yeah.
What's my life movie?
Mine. Hey Siri, what's my life movie?
Yeah.
Mine is John Carpenter's They Live, which is a film that I actually love, so works out. Rich Ferrando at Rich Ferrando says, the film was controversial because of its use of reenactments. It was not nominated for Best Documentary at the Academy Awards because of it. Curious to hear your thoughts.
I had a question. Why is that? Is it like, why was the Academy against that? I guess I don't really understand. I don't know too much about the Academy and why they do what they do and what they don't do what they do. And as you say, you don't like it. So
I think because it was seen as not having like the integrity of a real documentary, because you're now filming stuff. You're filming fake narrative stuff to put in. And so they were probably very stringent and they were like, no, this is not a pure documentary.
I need to see a documentary before this date. And I think that this will like make more sense to me.
So the film that did win because they didn't include The Thin Blue Line was a film called Hotel Terminus. It's 4.5 hours. And it's about Klaus Barbie and the Holocaust. And Screen Notes at Screen Notes _
Ooh.
says one of the few examples of reenactments actually working well as a stylistic choice. A documentary so revelatory it led to the release of a death row inmate.
Yeah.
In addition to wanting to cover a movie from Errol Morris for Documentary Month, I also wanted to include this because it has real world effect and changed the life of
The
someone.
impact.
And yeah.
Yeah.
And so like that's pretty incredible. And not saying for you, but if you don't like this movie, you still kind of can't deny that it had a pretty big impact on at least one man's life. So there's some people that we do know. Now it's time to go to a segment of the show where we hear from people that we don't know. It's called 1/2 star, 3 star, 5 star. All right, so these are reviews from letterboxd.com. We start with a 1/2 star review, which is the lowest rating that you can give a movie. And we go all the way up to a 5-star review, which is the highest rating that you can give a movie. And for the 1/2 star review, there are only 5, which is pretty low. And they're all really bad, except for one, which is too long. So I'm just going to include 2 real short ones.
Yes. Double whammy, double feature, coming at you, 1/2 star.
Actually, you know what? I'll give 3. So the first one says, this felt like it was directed by an 11-year-old.
Ooh.
Second one said, this movie sucks. You're all so dumb.
Okay.
And your is spelled U-R, which that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the last one says, dumb people chasing dumb people.
Wow.
1/2 star. 3 star. You okay?
I just like, before May Shall, I never went on Letterboxd to read reviews.
Mm-hmm.
And after doing it a whole month, I find it fascinating when people decide to like even comment or leave a review that's not really adding anything.
Right.
That's all.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Yeah. I try to write something because it really helps jog my memory. But yeah, like sometimes when it's just like this movie sucks, it's like, well, what are you really going to remember about that?
Yeah, and like, why did it suck? Tell me why it sucked.
Right. 3-star review says, a classic that didn't connect with me as much as I hoped, unfortunately. This was a revolutionary crime documentary in its presentation intertwining reenactments, though a lot of its design is talking head visuals. The miscarriage of justice is evident and intriguing, though I don't see how the documentary stands apart from many that I see today, aside from the great score by Philip Glass.
Okay.
And the only thing I would say is the reason you don't notice a difference between this and the movies of today is because this inspired those movies.
Right.
5-star review says, The Thin Blue Line is one of the best documentaries I've ever seen, but more importantly, one of the best movies I've ever seen. Glued to the screen, total investment, couldn't breathe during some scenes. Morris is a visual master, and I'm amazed at what emotions he moved. Disgust, anger, empathy, sadness, on-edge suspense, defeated disillusion. If you ever want to feel worse about the human race, this will do the trick. But then again, there's not too many films out there that literally determined a future for good. 5 stars.
Well said. Well said.
Yeah. All right. So we rate our films on a scale of 1 to 5. We also rate them as a schmovie, a movie, or a film. We give our recommendations and final thoughts. Michelle, would you like to go first?
Sure.
Okay. So I wrote down that you were going to rate this 3.5 stars.
Very good. I am rating this 3.5 stars.
All right.
And it is a film.
Mm-hmm.
And after researching and having this conversation, I feel more positively towards this.
Good.
Yeah. And it wasn't negative towards this, but again, I just had trouble understanding. But I mean, if he's going for stylistic, you nailed it, buddy.
Yep.
And like I said, I was sitting down for a doc, didn't know I was here for a film. So I would definitely recommend this, but I'm going to present it in a different way than you did.
Oh, cool.
And I think you should watch it, especially if you're into documentaries and in the true crime realm. I think this is like the OG.
Yeah.
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 Mm-hmm. Important.
Nice.
Okay. For you, I wrote down, I used my planner because I didn't have paper, but I wrote down 4.5 stars.
Very nice. Very nice. When I watched this the first time, I rated this 4 stars. And I think that I'm going to stay there.
Okay.
I think that I'm good at 4 stars. This film is important. It's well made. It's interesting. And I think that this might show all that a documentary can do.
Mm-hmm.
Which, now that I'm sitting here, maybe that's why I picked it. I don't know. But real world implications, it can expose, injustice and corruption. It can teach us something about what we thought we knew. And it can do it in an artistic and interesting way. And you can have Philip Glass and you can inject humor, even though it's a really dark story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you can drop the lower thirds, it turns out. I never knew.
Well,
You can, but maybe you shouldn't.
it's a choice. Maybe just one. Maybe just one.
1/3?
And then just don't add them in for the rest.
Got it. Hey, if you've got just one, we'd love it if you would take that one and turn it into a 5-star rating and review for the show. Oh my gosh, that was a hard pivot. Wherever you're listening, if you give us a rating and a review, really helps the show, brings a smile to our face, and helps us beat out the algorithm, which is just trying to keep the little shows down. You know what I mean? It's not fair. You can also send us an email, moviefriendspodcast@gmail.com. Let us know what you thought about The Thin Blue Line. Let us know what you thought about this episode.
Your coffee order.
Yeah, coffee order. There's a lot of details that we couldn't go over. Let us know which ones you can't believe we left out. You can also support the show, patreon.com/moviefriendspodcast. $5 a month gets you access to all of our additional shows, patron-only Discord, which, if you don't know what that is, it's a big group chat. It also gets you access to voting rights for monthly movies and every few months, a whole theme, much like documentaries, which is what we're doing now. And speaking of what we're doing now, next week, we're going to be going back to the great year, 1999.
We love 1999.
And we're going to be talking about American Movie, directed by Chris Smith. And do you want to know what it's about?
Yeah.
American Movie is the story of filmmaker Mark Borchardt, his mission, and his dream. Spanning over 2 years of intense struggle with his film, his family, financial decline, and spiritual crisis, American Movie is a portrayal of ambition, obsession, excess, and one man's quest for the American dream. And
Okay.
I am so curious as to how you are going to take this movie.
Do you like this movie?
I mean, this is my pick for the month, so
Oh,
I think
right. Okay, so this is your
I think
pick.
it's obvious, but
Okay.
so it's a little bit of a, it's a different movie. This one is much more lighthearted than The Thin Blue Line. I'll say that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alrighty. I look
Yeah.
forward to it. I've never seen it. So, yeah, this feels good.
It's a good one. 107 minutes, currently streaming on the Criterion Channel and Tubi. Hey, Michelle.
Seth, what's
before
up?
we leave,
Yeah.
I forgot. What are you doing September 21st?
Space Jam, baby.
Oh my gosh. That's right, folks. We are doing another live show. This one is on Long Island in the state of New York, and we're going to be covering the original Space Jam, and quite frankly, the only Space Jam to me.
I don't know why people keep asking me, like, which one are you covering? I'm like, the only one that should be talked about.
Right.
Why is this even a question?
Yes. No. Yeah. We'll probably mention in passing the new one, but
I guess I should watch the new one, huh?
Oh.
I really don't want to, but I do have to do my research for all things Space Jam.
I don't know if you need to.
Okay.
But anyway, what you need to do, listener, is come out. It's going to be a free event. Going to be a lot of gags.
Mm-hmm.
Surprise guest appearances.
Giveaways?
Every time I say giveaways, throwaways.
Throwaways. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perhaps even it's Long Island. Maybe there will be a bagel or two.
Maybe. You never know.
We don't know yet, but
we can attract it.
So yes, September 21st, Long Island, New York, Space Jam. You regretted not making it out for our Shrek 2 episode. Don't regret twice.
I mean, how cool that we're doing this will be our second live show of the year.
It's a tour.
It's a tour. Movie Friends is on tour.
I know.
Wow.
The most stationary tour of all time.
No, different locations in New York. It's the New York tour.
And who knows? I mean, that's September. Maybe by Christmas we'll be out. Pittsburgh.
Maybe. Yeah.
Ohio.
Sure.
South Dakota.
Invite us, friends. Where should we go on tour?
Let us, if you've got a local theater.
We want to visit it.
Let us know.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks, Michelle.
Thank you, Seth.
DocuJune.
DocuJune.
Shout out to good friend and patron Josie coming up with DocuJune. I couldn't come up with a name for this month.
Yeah, I saw that in the Discord. All of that went down.
Yeah.
Thank you, Josie.
Thank you. You saved us. But anyway, off to a good start. Looking forward to next week. All right. Well, thank you very much for listening. Until next time, when we're talking about American Movie from 1999. Have a good one.
Movie Friends is produced by Seth Vargas and Michelle Rubenstein. Music by Anthony Pecora. If you like the show, Please subscribe and give us a rating. It really helps us find new friends. Thanks!